Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Punch Drunk Critics. I'm Cortland Jacoby, and today we are talking Ted Lasso, the final season and the final episode. Today with Karen Peterson, one of my favorite human beings to talk to ever. Hi,
Oh,
Karen, how are you?
I'm good, Cortland. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, we just ended season three of Apple Plus's TV show, Ted Lasso. It was very much beloved, very much celebrated. What was sort of your relationship with Ted Lasso before the season? Let's see. And what were some of your like hopes and dreams for this final rundown?
I first watched the show like a lot of people did. I binged it after it had already come out. But it was like right when season one was just kind of like at its height of really drawing people in. So I caught it not at the beginning, but kind of early on. And we got through that first season, and I had heard that Jason Sudeikis said that he had planned on it being 3 seasons. And I said, okay, so the entire series is going to end with Ted going, he's going to accomplish what he needed to do in the UK. He's going to go back home to America. And that's, what I expected. So I wasn't really let down.
He did. He set up, I'm gonna come in and then it's gonna leave. Yeah.
Yeah. So going into the season, I kind of, I wanted to know that the characters that we've loved so much for 3 years were gonna be okay. And that everyone was gonna kind of not get an ending because there's no endings in life until the final one. But that everyone would just kind of we would get the sense of where they were headed in life next. And yeah, so I felt like this season did exactly what I hoped it would do. Maybe not in the necessarily in all of the ways that I thought it would, or even wanted it to, but yeah.
So going into season three, let's just do a little bit of a character rundown. So the team is doing okay. They got back into the Premier League and are kind of the underdogs of the season. Sam Obasanya is opening up a new restaurant. His relationship with team owner Rebecca Walton is sort of on the rocks. We don't really know what's happening with that. They kind of put it on pause last in the second season. And then we have Keely, who's the team PR person, opening up her own business, and sort of again kind of on the rocks with Roy Kent. We learned very early on in the first season that they've broken up. Jamie Tart is sort of, doing his own thing. Um, Doing okay, still's got a lot of unresolved daddy issues. And of course, we've got Ted, who's still reeling from his panic attacks. I think those are like the major players, right? I mean, that's one thing I kind of wanted to talk to you about is that this season we see the push for a lot of the secondary characters to come to the forefront to be main characters. And I think that for me, it worked on some level, and for on other levels, it didn't because we have so many characters in such a set amount of time to tell a story. Did that work for you? Did the number of characters like Trent Krim and Colin and Isaac and their stories being pushed to the forefront, did that work for you?
It did for me. And I think part of the reason is just because we've seen these characters
Yeah.
since the beginning and I feel like the way that they were integrated into the storylines that we were already following,
Right.
it felt, for me, it felt fairly natural. Um, and it led to a lot of fun. Like I loved having Trent Krim hang out with the team
Yeah.
this season and watching him go from like Roy won't have anything to do with him and won't let
Yeah.
the players have anything to do with him to he's one of the Diamond Dogs by the end,
Yeah.
and just watching that progression. And because he was there, he was able to have those moments, those really important moments with
Yeah.
Colin, which led to his story, which I think was a really important story
Mhm.
for a lot of LGBTQ kids, for a lot of players that are,
Yeah.
not able to live their truth. And so I thought that was an important storyline. And there's other things that happened through the season that either kind of started out and then never went anywhere, like the Zaba stuff,
The Zava stuff, yeah.
which it didn't it didn't bother me because I feel like the way that they did it just felt very like, yeah, this is just kind of how it is in life. People
Right.
come and go. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
really random. And I felt like what the results were of some of the things that happened, even with storylines that never really played out further than just a scene or two. I think that they accomplished exactly what they needed to do. And they didn't everything didn't need to matter for the entire season in order to work.
Right. I think this show is also very rife for spin-offs. So if you are a fan like me that had a couple qualms with the way the story is told, chances are this show isn't going away permanently, right? It might not be called Ted Lasso. It could be called Trent Crimm or Roy Kent or, one
Or
of
Richmond.
or yeah, or just Richmond. Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I There were a couple things that I did have issues with. I felt like season one, Sam was such a nice little addition, and season two, they very much amped his story up. Season three, I felt that they completely pulled back. I wanted more of Sam's story. There's a couple storylines in terms of hate that he gets. He starts talking politically online, and then his restaurant, his Nigerian restaurant, is completely destroyed. And then of course we had um, Sam Richardson, who plays this like very hoity-toity, maybe hoity-toity is not the right word,
It's
but this
pretty
very
evil.
like hot-headed, very African billionaire comes in and tries to buy the team or buy Sam last year, and then this year create this super team. He comes back, and so even how that's resolved, I didn't really feel like suited Sam. The fact that like at the very end we see that he's on the Nigerian team, but like how did he get there, right? We don't really get answers. I felt like his storyline just wasn't as fleshed out as I had hoped, nor did I really feel like Nate's was. Nate at the beginning of season three is now coaching another team. He's basically completely turned his back in anger on Richmond. They also have done the same. Um, and how that's kind of resolved, I feel like it doesn't resolve perfectly, which I feel like is very, very much life. I felt like it resolved way too quickly, right? Like it didn't feel it. I wish there were certain beats that were earlier in the story, if that makes sense. Like I felt like we're getting into episode, 8 and 9 and 10, and there's still major questions that we still have with Nate that they do somewhat resolve, but I don't necessarily know if it's a full.
Yeah, this is a complaint that I've heard from a lot of people. And for me, um, Nate didn't deserve to be forgiven, and that wasn't
No,
the point.
yeah,
And the point was really given to us by Beard, who shows up at his house,
yeah,
scares the shit out of him, and
right.
and gives that monologue, which was so well delivered.
Monologue, yeah,
Um, of, this is the Les Miserables story. Well, yes, it's very similar, but his whole point was, this is the person that Ted is. He forgives whether we deserve it or not. And and so for me, it was like, yeah, um, we see these things from Nate. We don't get a full, like, I actually hoped before the season started, I hoped at some point there was going to be like he was going to confront Ted at Ted's house, and he was going to see that picture that he was so upset that Ted didn't even put up anywhere was next to the picture of him and his son.
yeah,
I was hoping for that, but it was like it didn't ultimately matter because really the point wasn't whether Nate deserved to be forgiven. It was the fact
right.
that Ted is such a forgiving person. He forgives you whether you deserve it or not. And that's something that we all should be better at. And I think maybe that's why it worked for me, is because this is something that I'm actively trying to be better
Yeah,
at, is just accepting people and understanding that there's always more to the story that I don't know. And so for me, we didn't need to spend a lot of time on Nate's redemption journey
Right.
because we got exactly what we needed to.
Then why have him come back in the final episode at all? That's the thing of like I would have preferred maybe seeing him come in for like negotiations or talks of like him possibly coming back in the next season or him reconciling with the team on a larger level maybe. But just him being there sort of like as the assistant kit man. I don't know. I just
That's just it though. That
that's
to me was the point. He comes back as the assistant kit man. Like
right.
he's lower than when we first met him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It felt too, and I know this is Ted Lasso. I know that things are saccharine here. I understand, but it felt too kumbaya for even Ted Lasso for me. Like it felt too like, here's like this perfectly sweet ending, which again, in contrast, I also, and I don't know how you feel about this, that final episode, Jason Sudeikis's performance feels very one note to me. He doesn't show a lot of emotion, and I kept waiting for that Ted Lasso moment of him sort of like, being like, I created all this and now it's done. It just, I don't know if that was like a personal choice, if there's something that I'm missing there. How did that feel for you?
It worked for me, and it all came back down to, for me, it came down to one line, which was what he wrote on the manuscript cover to Trent Krim. It's
Right.
not about me. It never was.
Right.
And so to me, that's the thing is like Ted isn't going to be overly emotional and he's not going to be, like, look at what I did because to him, he didn't do anything. He came in, he just did his job, and now he's going back home to his kid. And you know, he's just not someone who's going to walk away from this experience like, oh, I'm so awesome. For him, it was just this was a cool experience that I had. And you get the sense that he's gonna miss these guys, but it's also not gonna like tear him up because he knows they're gonna be just fine without him.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I needed more emotion there. I needed some more emotion. I understand that some endings for people, like, for Ted, theoretically this is an ending. That it doesn't have that same amount of emotion. And I appreciate showing it. I just needed more. I don't know. I told you when the episode came out, we were discussing possibly talking about it, that my dream for the show is that Roy, Keeley, and Jamie all end up in a throuple. That doesn't exactly happen.
But kind of.
Sort of. We'll see next season on Roy Kent. So how do you feel about their arcs this
I
season?
will say the one thing that I personally was really sad about with the season is that it did not end with Keely and Roy back together, living
Yeah.
happily ever after.
Yeah.
And it's not that I think it was a bad decision because I do think that it led to a really great moment and really showed a lot. Like I think this really showed the growth of Jamie and Roy both.
Mm.
Because when they're sitting there like, oh well, Jamie's like, I'm gonna make a move on Keely then since you two aren't together. And then they end up in a fist fight. They end up at her house. She kicks them out. And I love that it doesn't even get into their conversation. It just shows her just like kicking them out. And then they're like, well, let's go get a beer, And so it's like they fought it out and they realize that they were both idiots and they're moving on. And then the next day, when Roy asks if he can be part of the Diamond Dogs, which was just like, oh, um, and you think it's going to be like, how do I get Keely back or
Yeah.
something? And it's how do you become a better person? And it was just like, oh, he needed all of this.
Yeah.
And his breakup with Keely was his own fault. And I think he knows that.
Yeah.
Um, I wish that it would have still concluded with like even just a hint that the two of them were going to get back
Right.
together. Um, so that was my one thing where I was like, oh, I'm really bummed about that. But I think that the relationship between the three was really well done.
Yeah. And I think, see, that was the one thing where I was like, I don't think it's going to get resolved by the end, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think that was one of the easiest things to resolve
Hmm.
that the show set up early on. Um, and they didn't, and I didn't mind that. I think Keely went on such a journey this year, entering a relationship with a woman and running her own PR firm, and then dealing with a sex scandal that interrupted that relationship with a woman and completely, almost destroyed her company. And I think I think for her, the journey wouldn't make sense if she ended up back in the arms of a dude, right? Like it just didn't really feel, maybe progressive is the wrong word, but it just didn't feel right, I think. Um,
It's just the romantic in me that was like, I just
yeah.
want them to be,
It,
be happily ever after. But at the same time, it was just like, well, no, but I think what they did with the story worked well.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think I don't necessarily think that these are the last time we're going to see these characters, right? Like I am hoping for a Lou Grant style like drama from like Trent Crim going in and like the seedy underbelly of like, London sports teams. And I would love to get like a show like that. But yeah, I just don't think this is the end for these dudes. What
Yeah, I
what
don't
are your
either.
hopes for what's next?
I mean, I personally would love to see the Richmond women's team, and I
Yeah.
would like Rebecca and Keely to be the leads, like the leads on that show, plus the female players. And then we see we see Roy, we see
Boys
Jamie,
in
we
the
see the
background.
other boys, yeah, showing up and stuff. But I would really like to see a show about this women's team. I think that'd be
I would
so much
too,
fun.
but throw Leslie in there as
Oh
well.
yeah. Yeah, he has
And
to
I
be
want to
there.
see more of Leslie's home life.
Yes. I love Leslie. He's one that we didn't see a lot of this season.
No, but he was such a no, but I'm not. I would love more Leslie. Like, don't get me wrong. If Ted Lasso gave me a whole season about Leslie, I would have loved it. He is such a mentor to so many people on the team. And I feel like that archetype, that kind of character trope can kind of come in and out as
Yeah.
needed. Um, we saw that a little bit when they go to Amsterdam and he's hanging out with Colin and kind of, or not
Mhm.
Colin, Will, the kid.
Well, yeah.
Um, they do look, Will and Colin look very, very similar. Um, hanging out with Will and kind of bringing Will's character out a little bit, which I think is like the perfect use of Leslie's character, and learning about jazz and playing. We get to see him play jazz again, which is absolutely wonderful. Um, so yeah, I don't necessarily know if like I hope that if we do get the women's team, which is such a cool thing, I'm glad that they're touching upon that. Um, that that we get Leslie. I would love to get,
Oh
it
yeah.
would still be female named, right? But yeah, so feminine junior.
Yep.
Yeah. I would love to see like maybe like, Mia Hamm or Megan Rapinoe like come in and say hi and
Totally, totally. Yeah. That would be so fun. Like we just, yeah, I think women's soccer, football, whatever we're calling it here, I think it's on on the rise. It's becoming so popular worldwide, not just here in the States. And it's kind of funny that that's actually women's soccer is what got people in the United States more interested in soccer in general. It's like, yeah, there's a show right there. It needs to happen. So,
Well, it's funny that that's happening too because they have the Angel City documentary on HBO right now.
hmm
So to
yeah.
have it's funny how Ted Lasso kind of like has mirrored these like sports stories over the last couple of years. Like, there's something very reminiscent of Ted Lasso and obviously what's happening at Wrexham with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. And, it would be really cool to have like Richmond's women's with,
Mhm.
the stuff that's happening at Angel City. So,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
yeah.
So, and there's opportunities. There's lots of opportunities to see the guys show up in a show like that
Yeah.
too. So, like supporting the girls, and I would love to see that that girl that Ted was kind of kicking the ball with in season one. I'd love to see her
Yeah,
come back and be on the team. I
that
always
would
thought
be
that she would
great.
end up like being back in the show, and then she never came back. I don't know who that actress is or what happened with her, but I always thought we would see her again, and we just didn't.
Did you feel like, so one thing that I guess we should mention is that there were interruptions on the final season. And I believe that they were major rewrites. They haven't really announced how extensive everything was. But because of that, you can definitely tell that there's a little bit of a disjoint with the season.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, the Zava thing. Um, Sharon, the therapist that we see a lot in season two, comes back for the first episode and the last episode of this season. And that you definitely feel after that first episode, I felt at least that she would be back more,
Mhm.
and she wasn't. Do you feel like that hindered the season at all, these production interruptions?
Um, I don't I don't know about hindered, but I definitely think that it impacted some storylines. I think probably we would have seen a little bit more of Sam's story play out.
Yeah.
That's my expectation. I think the stuff with Zava, it wasn't the fact that he left, it was that we weren't really sure if he was gonna just show back up at some
Right.
point, you know. It was like it was just kind of such an abrupt departure for
Yeah.
him that felt very unresolved. And I think that the reason I say I'm not sure if I would say hindered is because I think that they dealt with some of those things
Mhm.
fine. I just think that it would have played out differently if they hadn't had delays and rewrites and stoppages, you know, along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So
Um, in terms of the show ending, do you feel like this ending is like catastrophic Game of Thrones level, or do you feel like this is more of like a Succession ending, which is absolutely superb and everything makes sense, and like even though there are storylines that aren't resolved, like it feels like emotionally resolved? Is like, where are you on the spectrum?
for me, I feel like this was always intended to be 3 seasons to tell Ted's story. And I feel like they accomplished that. And I think that they left me wanting more from a lot of other characters. Like, I'm fine. I love Ted Lasso. I love him as a character. And I love Jason Sudeikis. I'm also fine not seeing any more of his story because I feel like we got it.
Right.
I would like to see more of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I I definitely do not feel like this was a Game of Thrones ending. I feel like this was um and I wouldn't say Succession either because I don't want more Succession. I think they did a great
Yeah.
job of ending that story, but I don't want to see those characters anymore.
But I
I
think
don't
also
I
that's what a finale should do, is that it wraps it up nicely and say this is done and you feel okay with it being done, right? And yeah.
yes, yeah, but I also like to when it's a show full of characters that I love, which is what Succession was not. I love Succession. It was not characters that I
Right.
love. When it's a show full of people that I just love and I've spent years getting to know, I want to at least be able to imagine like good things coming for them and wishing that, you know, like I loved Friends. I was obsessed with Friends. I still watch Friends reruns and I would love to see, you know, a little reunion, not like the reunion that they did on Max, but like an actual little movie kind of catching up. Where are they? Like
Yeah.
it's Emma's 21st birthday or whatever. Which is crazy. But but you know, those kinds of things and that's what I would like with Ted Lasso. Like I don't need to see Ted again, but I want to revisit these characters. And
Yeah.
that for me is the marks of a great finale of a show
Yeah.
that really worked.
Just watched the um Being Mary Tyler Moore documentary, and they talked a little bit about how like the 70s were a time for spinoffs. And I'm ready for us to have like a resurgence of the spinoff, like good spinoffs that last a longer time. I'm totally ready for that. So if we get, you know, a Trent Krim or a Roy Kent or a women's team or like, you know, on any level, I'm totally satisfied with that. I think for me, I first saw Ted Lasso, it was around the time of Middleburg in 2020. I think like the finale of season 1 had just aired and I started watching it. And what people don't realize is like nobody was talking about that show until like really, I would say, Emmy season,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like people started watching it, I would say like the like maybe Christmas holidays, latter part of 2020, more into 2021.
Yeah.
And I started watching the show and it just felt so special. I don't know if it was because of the pandemic and people were so depressed and in their own heads, and like TV was very, very cynical at the time, but there was just something so magical and wonderful about that first season. And then the second season came out last summer and you have something that's very like Empire Strikes Back, very opposite in tone, that doesn't have the warm and fuzzies fully the way that we get in season 1. And that's absolutely amazing. This season, yeah, it felt like a little bit of a letdown. And I think part of that was the production interruptions. I think, like you said, other things would have been fleshed out a little bit more and better. Also, we had a change in showrunner. Bill Lawrence was running it for the first 2 seasons and he didn't leave. He was still an executive producer, but he left that position in order to run Shrinking, which I also love,
Mm-hmm.
co-written by Roy Kent, Brett Goldstein. And so it felt different, right? And I think that is also the thing is, even if you're disappointed with Ted Lasso, I feel like you can still write it off as a life lesson that Ted Lasso is giving us, right? It's like life isn't this full magical fairy tale, and that endings, like you said, happen for a reason, and they don't always have the pomp and circumstance and all of that you want around them. I think this show is a really interesting exercise. I don't think exercise is the right word, but I think this holds a really special place in the television canon. I think that like we will see shows like it coming in the future. And I think that it made me care about football for 5 minutes, and that's an undertaking within itself. So cheers to Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on your end?
I think for me, the thing that always made the show so special was that at its heart, it's about heart and
Yeah,
it's about people caring about one another.
yeah,
And it's something, it's kindness. And that's something that we really need a lot more of in the world. And I think that, I've seen some pieces in the last week of people that were really upset. And I feel like people kind of missed the point. I
right.
think I think some people miss the point, or they're just at a place in life or in their minds or in their emotional, whatever is happening with them, that they just don't want that message. And and I think that's unfortunate. And I agree that I think that there will be some shows that try to copy this, but I think a lot of them won't work because they will not have the honest, true heart that Ted Lasso has. This show really is special because of the fact that it's not cynical, it's not mean-spirited,
Mm-mm.
and it does all those things in a very natural, very honest way. And I think that that is something that is really lacking in the world, and I think that a lot of people are not going to be able to replicate that, which is unfortunate. And I really do hope that we collectively we can rewatch this series again and really internalize some of the lessons that Ted's trying to teach us, because we really need them.
Be curious, not judgmental. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's a life lesson. I'm sad to see these characters go, but I don't think they're leaving. I think
It's
they're
not the end. Yeah.
around the corner.
Yeah.
They'll see something. Also, they're already posting stuff. Like they're already like I saw one of the cast members posted a date. I think it was the guy who plays Sam. He posted a date. Like it's coming. It's just we got to be patient.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with also what Jason Sudeikis wants to do, because he can do anything right now.
He can, well, and I was reading something the other day where he was talking about, because I don't know if you ever saw the TV promo ads that this
Yeah,
show was
yeah,
based on.
Yes.
And Ted in those, the Ted Lasso of like what was that, 19 or 2014 or
Yeah.
something? Those
Completely
NBC
different.
spots. Yeah, he's a lot more of a jerk. He's really arrogant.
That's
And so this article, I'm so sorry, I don't remember which publication it was for, but it was this interview where he was talking about how Ted changed, like his view of Ted and the version of Ted that we ultimately see in the TV in the series changed as a result, or kind of as an answer to the 2016 election and everything that happened in the Trump years. And I think that that's one of those things about Jason specifically, that I think that he really responds in the right way to what's
Mhm.
happening in the world. I don't know what's happening in his personal life. I'm not going to comment on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But like him in his ability to look at the world around him and respond to that creatively, I think that Ted Lasso is a great example of how to be better.
Yeah.
Um, just when we see things around us, how to approach those things creatively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you can find Ted Lasso, the final season, season 3, on Apple TV Plus. If you want more of that kind of universe, I would highly recommend Shrinking, which again comes from Bill Lawrence, who created Ted Lasso and Scrubs, and then also Brett Goldstein, who wrote on both shows. Though Brett Goldstein doesn't appear in Shrinking yet. Who knows?
He might.
It takes place in LA.
I'm
He's in
hoping
LA.
so.
It could happen. All right, Karen, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this wonderful show.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
So fun.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.